Hey everyone, ready to tackle the Great Wall of China.
Absolutely. It's a structure that's captured imaginations for centuries.
But there's so much more to it than meets the eye. It's not just one wall, right?
Right. That's one of the biggest misconceptions. It wasn't built all at once. It evolved over time, with different dynasties adding to it, changing it, for all sorts of reasons.
So more like a giant puzzle put together over centuries.
Yeah, a puzzle with different architects, different materials, different goals. Sometimes they even use natural barriers like mountains or rivers as part of the defense.
Talk about working with what you've got. But let's back up a bit. Before we get to the dynasties, when did the whole wall building thing even start in China?
Well, long before we think of China as one unified empire, you had all these different states constantly fighting, competing for power.
So basically, ancient China was Game of Thrones, but with walls.
Haha. In a way, yes. Each state wanted to protect their land, show off their strength, maybe even control trade routes.
Makes you wonder how they decided whose wall was best.
Oh, I'm sure there was plenty of bragging going on. But the point is, these walls had all these different purposes, right? It wasn't just about keeping people out.
So even back then, they were thinking strategically.
Oh, absolutely. They had to. It was a matter of survival. And speaking of strategy, let's talk about Qin Shi Huang, the emperor who finally unified China.
Yeah, he's the one who really put the great in Great Wall, right?
You could say that. He saw how important it was to protect this newly unified empire, especially from those nomadic groups in the north.
But he also tore down a lot of walls within China itself.
He did. He needed to break down those internal barriers to create a sense of unity, but at the same time, he knew a strong external defense was critical.
Makes sense. But imagine the work involved, all that building, all those materials, all by hand.
Oh, the human cost was immense. We can't forget about the millions who labored, sometimes for years, to build these walls. It was backbreaking, dangerous work.
And, not every dynasty was a fan of the wall. Some thought it was too expensive, or they preferred other strategies like diplomacy.
Exactly. Like the Tang Dynasty, for example. They were all about military might, expanding their influence through a powerful army. They figured a strong offense was the best defense.
So it wasn't just about building a wall and calling it a day.
No way! Each dynasty had to weigh its options. And that brings us to another big misconception, that the wall was solely meant to keep out the Mongols.
Oh, really? So the Mongols weren't the only ones they were worried about.
Not at all. The wall was used against a whole bunch of different groups over the centuries. It even saw action during periods of infighting between Chinese states.
Wow, so it's even more complicated than I thought.
History rarely follows a straight line. The wall's story is a perfect example of that. It's about power struggles, shifting borders, internal conflicts.
And that's just the beginning, right?
Oh yeah, we're just getting started. It really shows you how even something as solid as a wall can change its meaning.
It's a good point. I mean, back then it was all about protection, keeping people out.
Yeah.
And today it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Crazy to think about.
And a huge tourist attraction.
Right. But let's get back to the Ming Dynasty. They really went all out with the wall. Why was that?
Well, the Mongols were a big factor. Even though the Ming had pushed them out, the threat was still there. They needed a strong defense.
So not taking any chances.
Exactly. Plus, the Ming were all about order and stability. They wanted to clearly define their borders, control trade, make a statement.
I can imagine that took some serious planning.
Oh, yeah. They weren't just throwing up walls haphazardly. They were thinking strategically, using the landscape to their advantage. They had watchtowers, garrisons, all placed just right.
It's like a giant engineering puzzle.
It is. And a logistical nightmare, too. Just getting the materials there, all those bricks, the stone, it's mind-boggling.
And let's not forget the people who actually built it, right?
Absolutely. Thousands upon thousands of laborers. Their story is part of the wall's story. The hardship, the sacrifices. It's important to remember that.
It's a reminder that history isn't just about emperors and battles. It's about real people, their lives.
Exactly. And the wall also reminds us that history is messy, full of contradictions. I mean, it was built to keep people out, but it was also used to control movement within China itself.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. It wasn't just a barrier against outsiders.
Right, like under the Qing dynasty, they
Yes.
were really focused on managing their empire, making sure things didn't get out of hand. And the wall was part of that. They used it to limit expansion into certain areas, particularly by the Han Chinese.
So the wall could be a symbol of unity or division. Depends on who's in charge and what their goals are.
That's the thing about history, right? It's all about perspective. Who's writing the story? What are they trying to say?
And speaking of stories, the Great Wall is loaded with them. It's been used to represent so many different things. Strength, isolation, cultural identity, you name it.
It's incredible how a single structure can carry so much weight.
Why do you think that is? What makes a symbol so enduring?
It's a tough question. I mean, there's its size, obviously, its history, but it's also about the stories we tell, the images we see, the emotions it evokes.
Right. It's like you see a picture of the wall and you instantly feel something. Awe, maybe. Wonder. A little bit of mystery.
It taps into something deep, I think. This idea of human endeavor, of something lasting through time. It's powerful.
Definitely. And I think that's what makes it so interesting to explore.
Yeah.
There's always more to uncover.
Exactly. There's the physical wall, sure, but then there's the wall of our imagination, and that's constantly being built and rebuilt, just like the real one.
And that's what we're trying to do here, right? Unpack some of those layers, see what we can find.
Absolutely. It's all about peeling back the layers and seeing what's there. It's a structure that just keeps on giving, isn't it? Layers upon layers of history, meaning change.
You know, we were talking about all the different dynasties that added to the wall, but it's also seen its fair share of destruction, hasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It wasn't always appreciated the way it is now.
Like during the Cultural Revolution, right? When parts of it were actually torn down.
Exactly. It was seen as a symbol of the past, something to be erased. It's a reminder that even a structure as massive as the Great Wall can be vulnerable to the whims of people, to ideology.
It's kind of sad to think about, you know. This thing that was built to last being destroyed by its own people.
It's a powerful statement about how our view of history, our sense of identity, can change so dramatically.
Yeah. Thankfully, these days, there's a lot more emphasis on preserving the wall, recognizing its cultural importance.
It's become a source of pride again, a symbol of China's long history and resilience, a reminder of what they've overcome.
And that brings us to today, right? The wall as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, a major tourist destination. It's amazing how it continues to draw people in from all over the world.
I think it speaks to our fascination with the past, with human achievement on such a grand scale. It's like we see it and we're reminded of what we're capable of, both the good and the bad.
And maybe it makes us think about our own place in history, you know?
Mhm.
What will we leave behind? What will people say about us centuries from now?
Big questions. But that's the power of the Great Wall. It gets you thinking. It sparks your curiosity. It makes you want to learn more.
Well said. And that's what we've been trying to do here today, right? Dive into the history of the Great Wall, explore its many layers.
It's been a journey. From ancient battles to modern-day tourism, from a symbol of defense to a symbol of cultural identity. The wall has seen it all.
And even though we've covered a lot, it feels like we've only scratched the surface.
Yo, definitely. There's so much more to discover. Every brick, every watchtower, every legend has a story to tell.
So to everyone listening, if you ever get the chance to see the Great Wall in person, do it. It's an experience you won't forget.
And even if you can't make it there physically, keep exploring, keep asking questions, keep learning. The wall story is a reminder that history is never truly finished. It's always being written, reinterpreted, debated, and that's what makes it so fascinating.
Couldn't agree more. Thanks for joining us on this journey along the Great Wall. We'll see you next time for another deep dive.